Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande. My fun research project has more existential risk than I anticipated. Episode 122.
The explanation to Tiny Keltham resumed the next day with the workings of governance. Conceptually and to first order, the ideal that civilization is approximating is a giant macro agent composed of everybody in the world, taking coordinated macro actions to end up on the multi-agent optimal frontier, at a point along that frontier reflecting a fair division of the gains from that coordinated macro action. Well, to be clear, the dath ilan would shut it all down if actual coordination levels started to get anywhere near that. Civilization has spoken, with nearly one voice in fact, that it does not want to turn into a hive mind. This is why dath ilan deliberately doesn't have baseline's agency marker on it, like the name of a person. Dath ilan is not allowed to become a person. It is high on the list of things dath ilan is not allowed to do. There was a poll, once, put forth either by wacky trolls or sincere negative utilitarians, over how many people would, if they were voting on it directly, vote to put the agency marker back into dath ilan. 98% of respondents said no. Dath ilan has decided to definitely not turn into a hive mind. If it ever starts to get even close to that, everyone in civilization will decide in nearly unanimous accord that they would rather do something else, which is not that, and end up not there. Conformity levels are bad enough already according to their democracy's collective vote on the desired levels of that, and predicted to get slightly worse over the next 10 years, according to the prediction markets that aggregate all of civilization's knowledge into a single opinion that represents what civilization as a whole can be said to know about any future observable, which few sane people would dare to question too much, even in the privacy of their own thoughts. But for moral purposes, for purposes of understanding what civilization represents as a decision individuals make to coordinate among themselves, it represents moving partway towards aggregating all coordinating parties in dath ilan into one macroagent that weighted sums their utility functions together at a weighting that ends up giving every subagent a fair share of the gains according to their individual utility functions. If something like this macroagent actually existed, any time the macroagent faced a decision it had to make globally for one reason or another, it would make that decision in a way that reflected the preferences of everybody inside it. Nobody anywhere gets to run a city where some children don't get to learn baseline, even for the noblest possible purposes of scientific experimentation, to see what happens if you raise kids speaking only your new, improved language instead. This is a decision made over everywhere. If there's any loophole somewhere, something will happen that most people in civilization think should not happen anywhere. This example, to be clear, was selected on the basis of its controversy. Propositions like, all children get to learn some human language during their critical maturation period, pass with much higher supermajorities. Children don't have imaginary ownership tags pointing to their parents. Goes the proverb, out of dath ilan, there are limits to what civilization thinks a guardianship tag on a child should allow a parent to do. The system of imaginary ownership tags, likewise by its nature, is something that needs at least some global structure. It can potentially divide into compartments that fit sub-social systems, say where a family is tracking who owns what in an informal way that property registers don't track. But there's not much reliability in owning the food in your refrigerator if anybody anywhere in dath ilan isn't part of the system and can come in and eat your food in a way the police will shrug and not do anything about. There is, at the top level, one system of private property. In the eyes of the rest of civilization, weird experimental cities that are trying something else still have all the stuff inside them, tagged as belonging to a persistent contract representing that city. The rest of civilization will not come in and eat their food unless the city's persistent contract says they can. Now, in practice, dath ilani are still mostly human, and therefore way too computationally bounded to aggregate into even a not _2_ visibly _incoherent bounded _ approximation of a macro agent. Conceptually, and to second order then, civilization thinks it should be divided into a private sphere and a public shell. Nearly all the decisions are made locally, but subject to a global structure that contains things like children may not be threatened into unpaid labour, or everybody, no matter who they are or what they have done, retains the absolute right to cryosuspension upon their death, or the top level, in most places the only level, of the imaginary system of ownership tags and its contract specification language. The vast supermajority of civilization's real economic activity takes place within the private sphere, supported and contained and constrained and structured by the public shell. It's not that activity inside the private sphere is uncoordinated. It's that the decision as to how coordinated to be and who to coordinate with about it can be left up to each individual, computed locally, so long as they don't kill anybody or take stuff that doesn't belong to them or try to raise their own flaming-ass children with a proper conlang and without flaming-ass baseline, contaminating their innocent small minds. Conceptually speaking, this division overwhelmingly factorizes the computational problems of the approximated macroagent and simplifies the vast majority of dath ilan's decision problems immensely. It reduces the mental expense of almost all day-to-day life back to something individual humans can handle. Indeed, dath ilan does not want to become any more of a coordinated macroagent than that. Its prediction markets say things defined as bad will happen according to its aggregate utility function, so dath ilan isn't doing that. This does, however, leave some amount of decision power to the public shell. Some words must be spoken in one voice or not at all, and to say nothing is also a choice. So the question then becomes, how in practice does civilization aggregate its preferences into a macro preference about the sorts of issues that it meta-decides are wise to decide by macro preference at all? Direct democracy has been tried from time to time within some city of dath ilan, people making group decisions by all individually voting on them. It can work if you try it with 50 people, even in the most unstructured way. Get the number of direct voters up to 10,000 people, and no amount of helpfully intended structure in the voting process can save you. More than one thing goes wrong when 10,000 people try to directly vote to steer their polity. But if you had to pick one thing, it would be that people just can't pay enough individual attention to the things that their polity tries to have them directly vote on. When they start to refer their votes to purported experts and specialists, the politics that develop there are removed from them as individuals. There is not much of a sense of being in control then, nor are the voters actually in control. Republics have been tried, from time to time within some city of dath ilan. People making group decisions by voting to elect leaders who make those decisions. It can work if you try it with 50 people, even in the most unstructured way. Get the number of voters up to 10,000 people, and no amount of helpfully intended structure in the voting process can save you. More than one thing goes wrong when 10,000 people try to directly vote on leaders for their polity. But if you had to pick one thing, it would be that voters don't individually have enough time to figure out which strangers they should vote for, or why. When they start to refer their votes to purported experts and specialists, who are also strangers, the politics that develop there are removed from them as individuals. There is not much of a sense of being in control then, nor are the voters actually in control. There are 100 more clever proposals for how to run civilization's elections. If the current system starts to break, one of those will perhaps be adopted. Until that day comes, though, the structure of governance is the simplest departure from direct democracy that has been found to work at all. Every voter of civilization, everybody at least 13 years old or who has passed some competence tests before then, primarily exerts their influence through delegating their vote to a delegate. A delegate must have at least 50 votes to participate in the next higher layer at all, and can retain no more than 200 votes before the marginal added influence from each additional vote starts to diminish and grow sublinearly. Most delegates are not full-time, unless they are representing pretty rich people, but they're expected to be people interested in politics and who spend a lot of time on that. Your delegate might be somebody you know personally and trust, if you're the sort to know so many people personally that you know one delegate. It might be somebody who hung out their biography on the network and seemed a lot like you in some ways, and whom you chatted with about politics in a forum visible to the delegate's other voters. So all their voters could verify that their delegate hadn't been telling different people different stories. If you think you've got a problem with the way civilization is heading, you can talk to your delegate about that, and your delegate has time to talk back to you. That feature has been found to not actually be dispensable in practice. It needs to be the case that when you delegate your vote, you know who has your vote and you can talk to that person and they can talk back. Otherwise, people feel like they have no lever at all to pull on the vast structure that is governance, that there is nothing visible that changes when a voter casts their one vote. Sure, in principle, there's a decision cohort whose votes move in logical synchrony with yours, and your cohort is probably quite large unless you're a weird person. But some part of you more basic than that will feel like you're not in control if the only lever you have is an election that almost never comes down to the votes of yourself and your friends. The rest of the electoral structure follows almost automatically once you decide that this property has to be preserved at each layer. The next step up from delegates are electors, full-time well-paid professionals who each aggregate 4,000 to 25,000 underlying voters from 50 to 200 delegates. Few voters can talk to their electors, more than very briefly and on rare occasions. But your delegate can have some long conversations with them. If a lot of voters are saying the same thing to their delegate, the elector is liable to hear about it. Representatives aggregate electors, ultimately 300,000 to 3 million underlying votes apiece. There are roughly 1,000 of those in all civilization at any given time, with social status equivalent to an excellent CEO of a large company or a scientist who made an outstanding discovery inside their own field. Most people haven't heard of any particular one of them, but will be very impressed on hearing what they do for a living. And above all this, the 9 legislators of civilization are those 9 candidates who receive the most aggregate underlying votes from representatives. They vote with power proportional to their underlying votes, but when a legislator starts to have voting power exceeding twice that of the median legislator, their power begins to grow sublinearly. By this means is too much power prevented from concentrating into a single politician's hands. Surrounding all this, of course, are numerous features that any political design specialist of civilization would consider obvious. Any voter, or delegate, or elector, or representative, votes for a list of 3 possible delegates of the next layer up. If your first choice doesn't have enough votes yet to be a valid representer, your vote cascades down to the next person on your list, but remains active and ready to switch up if needed. This lets you vote for new delegates entering the system, without that wasting your vote while there aren't enough votes yet. Anyone can at any time immediately eliminate a person from their 3 list, but it takes a 60-day cooldown to add a new person, or reorder the list. The government design isn't meant to make it cheap or common to threaten your delegate with a temporary vote switch if they don't vote your way on that particular day. The government design isn't meant to make it possible for a new, brilliant, charismatic leader to take over the entire government the next day with no cooldowns. It is meant to let you rapidly remove your vote from a delegate that has sufficiently ticked you off. Once you have served as a delegate, or delegate of any other level, you can't afterward serve in any other branches of governance. Similarly, a delegate can never again be eligible for candidacy as an elector, though they can become a representative or a legislator. Someone who has been an elector can never be a representative can never become a legislator. This is meant to prevent a political structure whose upper ranks offer promotion as a reward to the most compliant members of the ranks below, for by this dark conspiratorial method, the delegates could become aligned to the structure above rather than their delegators below. Most dath would be suspicious of a scheme that tried to promote electors from delegates in any case. They wouldn't think there should be a political career ladder if someone proposed that concept to them. Dath are instinctively suspicious of all things meta and much more suspicious of anything purely meta. They want heavy doses of object level mixed in. To become an elector, you do something impressive enough, preferably something entirely outside of governance, that delegates will be impressed by you. You definitely don't become an elector by being among the most ambitious and power-seeking people who wanted to climb high and knew they had to start out a lowly delegate, who then won a competition to serve the system above them diligently enough to be selected for a list of electors, fed to a political party's captive delegates. If a dath saw a system like this, that was supposedly a democracy set in place by the will of its people, they would ask what the captive voters even thought they were supposedly trying to do under the official story. The 9 legislators of civilization have 2 functions. First is to pass worldwide regulations, each of which must be read aloud by a legislator, who thereby accepts responsibility for that regulation. And when that legislator retires, a new legislator must be found to read aloud and accept responsibility for that regulation, or it will be stricken from the books. Every regulation in civilization, if something goes wrong with it, is the fault of one particular legislator who accepted responsibility for it. And to speak it aloud, it is nowadays thought symbolizes the acceptance of this responsibility. Modern dath aren't really the types in the first place to produce literally unspeakable enormous volumes of legislation that no hapless citizen or professional politician could ever read within their one lifetime, let alone understand. Even dath who aren't professional programmers, have written enough code to know that each line of code to maintain is an ongoing cost. Even dath who aren't professional economists, know that regulatory burdens on economies increase quadratically in the cost imposed on each transaction. They would regard it as contrary to the notion of a lawful polity with law-abiding citizens, that the citizens cannot possibly know what all the laws are, let alone obey them. Dath don't go in for fake laws in the same way as Galarian polities with lots of them. They take laws much too seriously to put laws on the books just for show. But if somehow the dath forgot all that and did not immediately rederive it, the constitutional requirement that a legislator periodically speak a regulation aloud to keep it effective would serve as a final check on the cancerous growth of legislative codebases. Plenty of legislators pass through their whole terms of office without ever speaking any new regulation into existence. Their function is not to make regulations. Civilization already has regulations. Legislators mostly maintain and repair those regulations and negotiate the changing preferences of civilization about which final outcomes it wants to steer for using its policy prediction markets. New system features are terrifically expensive when everyone governed by them has to remember every relevant line of code. If you want any new feature implemented in civilization, you'd better be ready to explain which old features should be repealed to make room. The second function of the 9 legislators of civilization is to appoint the rest of governance, in particular the chief executive, certain key officers below the chief executive, the 5 judges of civilization on the court of final settlement, of which all lesser courts are hierarchical prediction markets. The chief executive, in turn, is the one person finally responsible for any otherwise unhandled exceptions in civilization, and the one person who supervises those who supervise those who supervise, all the way down. The key principle governing the executive branch of government is the doctrine of sole accountability, being able to answer the question, who is the one person who has or had responsibility for this decision? On this topic, Keltham has already spoken. From the perspective of a Galarian polity not being efficiently run by Hell, from the perspective of Toldor, say, or Absalom, they might be surprised at how few committees and rules there are inside of governance. Governance does not try to ensure systemic properties via endless rules intended to constrain the particular actions taken, nor by having committees supposedly ensuring that no one person has the power to do a naughty thing by themselves. Rules and committees make power illegible, let people evade responsibility for their outputs inside the system, and then you really are in trouble. Civilization's approach is to identify the one person responsible for achieving the final outcome desired and logging their major actions and holding them solely accountable for those, with their manager being the one person responsible for monitoring them and holding them to account. Or on other occasions, civilization's approach is to state desirable observables and have policy prediction markets about which policies will achieve them. Though even when it comes to following a policy prediction market's advice, there is still, of course, the one person who is solely accountable for following that advice, else throwing an exception if the advice seemed weird, and the one person whose job it is to correctly state the thing the prediction market should predict, and so on. This is the systemic design principle by which civilization avoids a regulatory explosion of endlessly particular and detailed constraints on actions, meant to avert bad things that people imagine might possibly happen if a constraint were violated. Civilization tries instead to state the compact final outcomes rather than the wiggly details of the exact strategies needed to achieve them, and to identify people solely responsible for those outcomes. There are also keeper cutouts at key points along the whole structure of governance. The executive of the military reports not only to the chief executive, but also to an oath-sworn keeper who can prevent the executive of the military from being fired, demoted, or reduced in salary just because the chief executive or even the legislature says so. It would be a big deal, obviously, for a keeper to fire this override. But among the things you buy when you hire a keeper is that the keeper will do what they said they'd do, and not give five flying fucks about what sort of big deal results. If the legislators and the chief executive get together and decide to order the military to crush all resistance, the keeper cutout is there to ensure that the executive of the military doesn't get a pay cut immediately after they tell the legislature and chief executive to screw off. One supposes that this personal relationship could also be the point at which the keepers are secretly staying in control of the military via talk control. Yes, fine. But at some level of paranoia, it ceases to be productive to worry about this sort of thing, because how are you even supposed to rearrange your civilization such that this becomes any less probable? The problem isn't the exact structure, it's that such a thing as talk control exists in the first place. A slightly different arrangement wouldn't help with the paranoia there. The dark version of this conspiracy has a hidden keeper controlling the executive of the military, not a clearly labelled one. Right? And that's governance. By dath standards, it's a giant ugly hack in every aspect that isn't constrained down to a single possible choice by first principles, and they're annoyed with themselves about it. A lot of other dimensions, if they heard what passes for a political complaint in dath would probably try to strangle the entire planet. And the key point behind the whole mental exercise of beginning over from scratch is this. This is what an approximation of an attempt of a world to coordinate with you should look like. This is how much of the gains from trade you should at least expect. No more inconvenience and injury than this should you expect from your government, and if governance ever gets too far away from that, why forget it all, rederive it all, and start over. All of governance is a dream, just as much as ownership tags are a willing collective hallucination. If it turns into a bad dream, it's time to wake up. Your next best alternative to governance, if it departs from this standard, is at least this good. So, if that time comes, you can do something else which is not governance. They run an annual Oops, It's Time to Overthrow the Government festival in dath ilan. Sometimes you have to defeat the hypothetical corrupted governance military. Sometimes the military is still made of nice people who aren't going to fire on a civilian population, this rehearsal. And instead, you have to distrust the network and all of the existing politicians and very serious people, and organize your own functional government from scratch by the end of the day. And the point of all that rehearsing is to decrease the friction cost to overthrow the government, because lowering the cost of overthrowing governance decreases the amount that governance can be inconvenient or injurious at people before governance knows its people will overthrow it. Well, and the other point is to more accurately estimate those friction costs. They are, by dath ilani standards, quite high, on the order of 5% of GDP depending on how much institutional expertise gets lost and how many days people have to miss work. Nobody would lightly suggest overthrowing the government. That's like losing 20 days' worth of income for everyone. One shouldn't do that without a really strong reason.
Tiny Keltham was not ultimately satisfied with this explanation once it completed. Tiny Keltham did, in fact, start trying to band together with other children to overthrow governance. Tiny Keltham convinced 4 other boys and 1 girl to go in with him on that. And what happened after that point would be a story for another day. But let's just say that if, in fact, all of the grown-up adults in Galarian are secretly collaborating to construct an elaborate false reality around Keltham, it would not be his first time.
Well, what was civilization supposed to do there? Slap down Tiny Keltham immediately? You don't want to discourage that kind of initiative and spark. Adorable smoles banding together to try to overthrow the entire world government should have an educational and fun experience about that.
So they played along in order to show you how futile it was? Gregoria asks.
Gregoria, try to let go of the conspiracy hypothesis here for 12 seconds. When a group of 6 adorable children set out to overthrow governance, you don't need a special additional effort to make their attempts seem futile to them. They are not, in fact, going to win. Now imagine you're a civilization that thinks that these children are showing a spark of individualism that's important to prevent all that law from turning dath ilan into one giant hive mind, group intellect, which I was vehemently against, obviously, but your average dath ilani is only slightly less vehement about that. The fact that these children's efforts are going to be massively futile is a problem. There was a prediction market about how to end up discouraging us all the least, which I know about because my parents used to tell this story for years, at parties with their own generation, afterwards, until I moved out of home, 1 year earlier than usual for my age cohort.
They tried to make you think you were succeeding at overthrowing the government?
That is somewhat closer to what happened, yes. But, oh look, it's dinner time. We should all go do that, shouldn't we? Yes, we definitely should.
PL timestamp, day 17, 13, evening.
Dinner does not get them to stop having questions about dath ilan's government. What sorts of things do you tell your delegates about? The whole thing actually sounds kind of like the Chelish system of baronies and counties and duchies, except more intentional. Maybe there's a way to preserve Cheliax's existing system, but turn it into that?
Keltham kind of didn't bother his delegate all that much. He didn't particularly want to change civilization by voting at things. Keltham just paid off one of his friends to do some research on the network to find him a delegate. Professional political matchmaking is not looked kindly upon for all sorts of reasons. It would be an absurdly concentrated target for corruption attempts. His friend came back with a 52-year-old, but not grandfather troped, individualist type, formerly the beloved manager of some small company, living 15 minutes away in default, who was just starting out as a delegate after retiring. Keltham went to a dinner party with 3 other potential voters to check the guy out. He seemed pretty gung-ho on pushing out the private sphere against the public shell relative to the current balancing point. Keltham tossed the guy his vote along with a spreadsheet of Keltham's personal preferences over some civilizational desiderata. Yes, he was serious. He'd like to see much less altruism in future generations, and then mostly forgot about it. Now and then, Keltham would check in and see that his guy's elector had switched votes to a representative who was negotiating with one of the legislators to switch their vote in exchange for influence on the next chief executive being an ex-business manager type instead of an ex-trader, and with less of an emphasis on pondering that person's effective philanthropy bets and more emphasis on how they'd run their business. Keltham was not under the impression that current counts would take well to their barons handing them spreadsheets of utility function weights, or barons warning counts they were about to change their allegiance to a different count. He thought that counts would tend to have militantly strong views about keeping their current jobs. Is Keltham wrong about this?
Oh no, they totally would. They'd be furious. But they're going to be furious about most possible solutions here.
Welp, they can try to pay an unreasonable amount so people will be more cheerful about it, but Keltham expects that some point or another it's ultimately going to come down to, you can have 10 pounds of spell silver in exchange for going quietly, or you can have 0 pounds of spell silver and also have to pay for a raised dead afterwards.
It might come down to that, but it's not very smart to be saying that now. Because, well, then if any of them find out, they might decide they'd rather stop things getting to that point.
They'd better leave it out of any reports they file about dinner-time conversations then, and Keltham will be sure not to say it during class. You can't actually make spell silver cheap enough to produce +6 intelligence headbands for everybody and not have your society change at all, especially insofar as your current social system _design is, in fact, stupid. But anybody who can't work that out on their own gets to be taken by surprise, Keltham supposes. How was the share language, baseline, and Keltham's use of baseline loanwords thrown into Taldane, by the way? It made his life easier, definitely, but he's not sure how it felt from the other end.
It mostly made sense. The extra specificity seemed worth the occasional needing to mentally rewind several sentences and try to piece together what they were saying. Probably various people will catch on that they're going to lose their hats, and some of them will rebel about it. But if they find out at different rates, it'll be harder for them to coordinate on rebelling about it.
Well, if they don't tell any other counts about it, maybe they can have some of the ill-gotten stuff of any extra extractive counts who didn't go quietly. Keltham does remember how all majoritarian coalitions are theoretically unstable because a sub-coalition could kick somebody out and redivide that person's gains among themselves, if for some odd reason they weren't using logical decision theory, that is.
People will be doing those calculations, yes. As long as the project has the backing of the church and the queen, the outcome's not really in question. But it's still better not to advertise anything worrying.
Are there places or people outside the classroom to whom Keltham should avoid saying particular things?
Probably he shouldn't say this stuff to the Spellsilver consultants or people like that. Security's been screened and anyone Asmodeus has chosen is safe, obviously.
He had in fact worked that out himself, but Keltham thanks them nonetheless for the advice. Why trust what you can verify, as the saying goes?
A timestamp, day 17:13. Still evening.
After dinner, Keltham, who previously sent off a certain letter discussed with Carissa, now receives a reply on the evening teleport. It comes with a package even.
To Keltham out of dath ilan. I cannot, alas, afford the time to properly monitor and control your possession's shaping at this remove. As such, take all this advice with a grain of salt and consult Subirax, perhaps. She can forward further questions on to me if she cannot answer them herself. Your basic concept of treatment appears to me sound. I am, in fact, impressed with you for inventing it, including such details as warning your possession that she is not at all to punish herself, though I would have phrased it as saying that the responsibility for punishing her while she was chained lay entirely with myself, and I would not tolerate my prerogative being usurped. I would be greatly interested in hearing if there is law governing such matters, known to you. I do not expect under the circumstances that dath ilan taught you how to torment one's possession while she is chained to a bed, but I wonder if they taught you other principles that were relevant. What shaped your intuitions to suggest that? Most people I need to correct about that sort of thing, and then even after they are corrected, they do not really seem to understand. If there's favor due for my answers and actions in the rest of this letter, I'd call in some or all of it for a detailed reply there. Your concern that teaching your possession to show you truthful pain might in the end not teach her truthful pleasure is likewise sound. The objective is to train her to allow any of her real reactions through unimpeded when you demand it so, not only pain. I am enclosing a collar which increases sensitivity to tickling. This is loaned to you, not given, but I do not expect to need it back anytime soon. If you can press from your possession screams of pain and laughter both, that she cannot think about and cannot stop arising from herself, I expect you can make some progress on teaching her body to show its true reactions once more in the realm of pleasure. There are cheats for that directly, items enchanted whose touch causes ecstasy, but to use those cheats comes with its own dangers. It seems prudent to try things this way first. When it comes time to test her pleasure again, do not neglect the fundamentals of Carissa's sexuality. Real power over her, real possession of her, that no other could take her from you if you wish to keep her, that you have gone and will go to great lengths to keep her, that she could not escape you, that whatever kindness she has of you was your own choice between that and cruelty, that nothing within or without would restrain you from greater cruelty if you felt any wish for it, and so if she happens to receive kindness, that is your true gift to her, unobligated. My imagination of Isidre is yelling at me not to press you too far, too quickly. But be it clear that if I were Keltham testing his possession's capacity for pleasure, I would be forcing her firmly into the bed chains, allowing and indeed demanding her sincere resistance, and then overcoming whatever resistance she offered. To do otherwise would pointlessly handicap myself. I enclose a 5-charge rod of Curse of Magic Negation. A charge will last 1.5 hours when applied to your possession. I would advise enhancing it with your own Bestow Curse, 3rd circle, targeted narrowly on her ability to overcome the resulting spellblight of negation. You will also need to have requested a Remove Curse to negate your own bestowed curse afterwards. A bull's strength and cat's grace should do for yourself, and allow you to physically overpower her once she cannot cast magic against you. The once-circle wizard spell Ray of Enfeeblement is a possible backup here, but it is better if you can overpower your possession without handicapping her apart from her magic. Don't flinch back from fighting in a way that requires you to heal yourself during or herself afterwards. There is nothing you can do that Subirax cannot undo. Being overpowered now and then by her Keltham is good for a Carissa. I enclose an order commanding security to drag Carissa Sever to your bed, should you so wish, in case it's easier that way the first time. You will, however, be more likely to get the results you desire if you can manage to do it yourself and without flinching. A possibility for avoiding that flinch? Quietly take one of Carissa's stray hairs, and then ask one of your other relationships to alter self and disguise self to Carissa's appearance, so that you can rehearse the subdual, with your target voluntarily not using her magic. I enclose a signed requisition permitting a woman of your choice to borrow a rod which will extend the duration of alter self when used by her. I'd expect there to be one of those on site, or if not, it can come by Agorian. Feel free to try other games of that variety using the same requisition. It would be foolish in any of these regards to do any such act for your possession's sake rather than your own. She is liable to notice the difference. What you cannot enjoy for yourself, want for yourself, you should not do. It would, however, be equally foolish to want something of your possession and not take it, for what you think is her sake. She wants above all for her owner to be evil, powerful, and unrestrained. Without those qualities, it is not possible for somebody to really be in possession of her. Kindness means nothing from a boy obliged by binds of goodness to be kind. It is necessary to find your caged cruelty and free it, to lay forcefully to rest her fears over whether it is your will or hers that governs, before she will be freed to fully appreciate those other times when you choose kisses and gentleness instead. Others could give her a soft touch, did she wish that. She would, in fact, have a hard time finding another boy to face down the queen upon the throne and extort control of her from Cheliax. Think first of your own wants, and when you are done thinking of those, you should find that there seems hardly any need to think of hers. Abigail Thrune II, Queen of Cheliax. S. It's fine to owe me favor, or call it due, and better yet if you wish to repay by answering my question in the 3rd paragraph. Any morsels of law about this matter would be greatly precious to me, but one hears reports that you may be more comfortable if I disclose what some prices would ordinarily be, and you may pay those instead, do you wish? These amounts are not particularly significant to myself. My time in writing this letter would cost more, if I knew how to put any sensible price on it, which I don't, at least not short of you using your god's spell on me. I would much prefer the answer to my question, even if it's only that you don't know how you knew. Yet, as I'd have you understand our ways, I will also stretch out my hand for yours. So, collar that increases tickling sensitivity. Loan price, 20 gold, week. Meta magic rod of spell extension. Loan price, 150 gold, week, for outright loan, however, not occasional borrowing. Rod applying curse of magic. Negation. Loan price 30 gold. Week plus 300 gold. Charge used. Stay evil. Abigail.
He may possibly require a few additional minutes to come to terms with this letter and fully process it.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059